Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. So this is a program based on current affairs and the ways in which we can address mains questions which come under current affairs. Okay, so we will move forward and look at the question for the day. So this is another scheme based question. So for the past few days, if you have noticed, we have addressed some scheme based questions. One of them was midday meal scheme and so on. So typically across all these schemes, we see two common subparts. One of them is asking us about the loopholes in that particular scheme, and the second thing it is asking us is to provide some kind of measures to improve the functioning of the scheme. So these are the two things which are commonly present in most of the scheme based questions that we have addressed so far. But today the question has been tweaked a bit. In order to create some kind of panic in the minds of the student, we will see how to address such kind of questions. The first thing is to get rid of the panic. See, if the question is difficult for you, it is difficult for everybody. Keep that in mind. And the question is not difficult as such, but it has been minorly modified in order to create some kind of anxiety in the minds of the student. So we will look at the question and then we will see how to build a structure for that particular question. We will build the skeleton and then we will move forward as usual and evaluate a sample answer. All right. So before I go forward, I'll quickly list down the prerequisites that are required for a scheme based question. The first thing to talk about is the provisions. If you know the provisions of the scheme, the deed is half done because the examiner knows the factual depth you have. So keep that in mind. The second thing you need to talk about is the reports. For example, like the other day, I was telling you all that Manrega has been audited by CAG and CAG has given his report. In fact, in this particular scheme of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana as well, CAG has given out its report. You could take a point or two from these kinds of reports in order to substantiate your opinion. Okay. The third thing is to list the article if possible. So like I said, every scheme that we have tries to hit some kind of article, one or more articles in the constitution, and it is always good to list those articles. The most important of these things, of course, is going to be the provisions. For example, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana tries to provide liquefied petroleum gas, LPG gas, first thing, and secondly, to who do we give out this gas? To BPL households. How are they identified? They are identified by socio-economic caste survey. And what is the subsidy that is given? There is a figure for that. So all these things provide the factual depth to your answer. So keep these provisions in mind. So these three things are going to be your prerequisites when you address a scheme based question. Okay. So if we've seen the prerequisites, now we will read the question once and then build a framework. Not only the coverage of the beneficiaries, but also the continuity by them is important for success of a well-intended government scheme. Examine the statement in the context of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. So while in other questions, it was easy for us to identify the subparts because we could directly see that it was asking for us the problems. So we wrote it as theme 1, and then it asked for the solution where we wrote as subpart 2, and then we wrote the same subparts in the structure. So this particular question does not have that kind of clear segregation, and you have to do that segregation in your mind, and it is fairly simple. Look, the question is not just about Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana is just a case study that we have to use in order to substantiate the statement that has been given. The statement is about every scheme in general. It is telling you that every scheme, any scheme you take, is going to be successful if it has two factors. One factor is to cover the intended beneficiaries. The second factor is to make sure that these people or the beneficiaries continue with the scheme till the objectives of the scheme are realized. Let's say, for example, you have Swachh Bharat Mission. Swachh Bharat Mission is not just about creation of toilets, okay? So you also have to make sure that people are utilizing these toilets. That is what is meant by continuity. So not only the coverage of beneficiaries, but also continuity by them. So not just creation of toilets, which is coverage, is important, but also the continuous usage of these toilets by the beneficiaries. So this is a two-pronged. two-pronged theme which is required for the successful implementation of a scheme. So you have to keep this in mind. In this framework, you have to analyze the working of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. So what do? Basically, we will look at Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. So we will say that the coverage of the scheme is okay, because the coverage indeed is okay as pointed out by newspaper articles, CAG articles and so on. So the coverage is okay, the coverage is good, but then there are problems in the continuity of the scheme. So what you're doing is basically tweaking the nature of your nature of your answer in order to suit the needs of the question. So you're talking about every government scheme in general. This is going to be the first thing that you have to address, because it is talking about any government scheme in general. You have to talk about the different things that are required for the proper implementation of a government scheme in order to achieve its intended objectives. And then we take the case study of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana, and then we will tell them that the coverage is good. And the next subpart that we're going to make is to tell them that the continuity is a problem. Okay, so far we have segregated the question into different subparts, and we are going to put 3 or 4 points under each of these subparts, and we are done. But if you look at the structure that I've just made, what have I done? I've said that the coverage is good, but there are issues in the continuity, which is to say that the scheme is prone to being a failure. So what do I have to do? I have to give them the solutions, at least 2 to 3 solutions I have to give them, so that it creates a positivistic outlook to the answer that I am giving them. So as usual, we will move to the conclusion, 1 to 2 line conclusion, which is not generic, and then we will start with introduction. So this is going to be the basic framework of our answer. So I hope you all can see this. As soon as I see the question, I am trying to segregate my mind into different themes, and each theme I am listing down, so that the answer reflects the nature of the question, and each and every part of the question is handled adequately by my subparts. That is the thing I have to do. Keep in mind, we have been created, right? All these things have to be done in your mind. When you write an answer, it just has to be filtered through the structure in your mind and has to come out as a neatly segregated answer, and that is what the examiner will see, and that is what the examiner will love, and that is what the examiner will give his marks to. You have to keep this thing in mind. So we'll start. We haven't talked about how to start an introduction. One thing is to talk about the essence of the scheme. In this way, you are basically telling him that you know about the scheme. And the second thing is to talk about air pollution as such, because the scheme as such is to handle the indoor air pollution, right? Indoor air pollution is creating deaths in the economy, which is why the scheme has been launched to prevent indoor air pollution related cancer, related diseases, related bronchitis and so on. So you could talk about the problems caused by indoor air pollution, and then you can say that in this context, we have launched a scheme called Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana to provide clean cooking fuel. This is one way to start. The second way to start is to directly talk about Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana, its objectives, and put out some facts, and then you're sorted. Okay, and then you can directly move to the body of the question. So we've seen the structure of the answer. Now we will move forward and see if the person has addressed the question properly. Okay. So this is the introduction he has given. Air pollution contributed to 1.2 million deaths in India, of which indoor air pollution formed a significant component. Okay, he has given me his figure. Now I would like to see where he got this figure from. See, he has talked about State of Global Air Report. So these things are important. He is substantiating his numbers with a fact. Okay, so and this point, and don't worry thinking that I have to keep so many things in mind. No, the same fact can be used in your essay. The same fact can be used in your GS3. So you have to learn only a few set of facts, and you have to revise them repeatedly, so that you can use them by tweaking them to different GS papers. Okay, so this is one such metric that you have to use. Air pollution ka estimate kitna hai, water pollution ka estimate kitna hai, and so on. These things you have to keep in mind. So we have talked about air pollution and the problems it is causing. In this context, PMUY has been launched to provide LPG connections for the poor with an assistance of 1600 per connection. So this is a good introduction, but how many lines has he written? He has written around 7 lines. This is eating up a lot of space. This could have been cut down to 4 to 5 lines. Now the question is, how do we do it? the point is not how we do it, we have to do it. Okay, we have to make the lives of the examiner very easy. Until and unless it is easily readable, it is easily visible for the examiner, he won't give you marks. And for us to do that, we have to somehow create the skill to complete this in 4 or 5 lines. And how it has to be done, it is our job. It is the job of the writer of the answer. Okay, so this has to be cut down, that has been said. Now we will move forward. What are we supposed to do? We are to talk about the working of a scheme in general, any general scheme, and then we would move forward to talk about Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana. That is what we have said. So let's see what he does. See, features of a successful government scheme. Here he is talking about any government scheme in general. So what he is doing, he is basically lying within the bandwidth of the question. So the question is about any government scheme in general. So he is warming up the body of his answer by talking about any government scheme in general and its important facets. One, he says that the coverage has to be important. Next, the continuity of beneficiaries. And see, he has also extended the criteria that has been given by the question to create a holistic perspective of a government scheme and for the proper implementation of government scheme. He has said the monitoring is also important and it has to be done by an independent authority or by a social audit. And after monitoring, feedback has to come and then there should be course correction. So this is basically telling me that he knows everything about the functioning of a government scheme. Any government scheme, for us to properly implement, these are the things have to be kept in mind. Okay, so he has totally addressed the first statement that has been given in the question. Now I, as an examiner, am satisfied. Now all I have to see is what thoughts he has on Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana, because that is the case study we have provided. Let's see what he does. Coverage of PMUI is extensive. So he is basically mimicking the nature of the question. He is saying that the coverage is high. Next let's just scroll down and see what he does. But then he says, however, there are problems in continuity. Sir, the coverage is high, but there are issues. And then what is he supposed to do? He is supposed to bridge these two by giving solutions of way forward. Okay, so I'm already satisfied by looking at the subheadings. See, what we are trying to do is to cultivate this skill in your mind. We have to cultivate the idea of giving good subheadings in order to give a holistic perspective for the examiner. Okay, so coverage of the PMUI is extensive because he has said that he has to substantiate it. 90% of targeted connections were achieved. Good. LPG panchayats were held to increase awareness. This is a good point. LPG panchayats is basically a technical point. This is good. Annual consumption of LPG cylinders has increased. This has been pointed out by CAG recently, by the way. Okay, so I'm so far satisfied that the coverage of the scheme is extensive because he has properly substantiated his points. Now I want to see what reasons he has to believe that the continuity of the beneficiaries is not proper. He says that the refills are meager. People are taking up the connections, but the problem is they are not refilling their cylinders. Second thing is relapse to firewood cooking, which is more easily accessible. Because LPG connections are not easily accessible, after the first down payment, after the first cylinder that I use, I will relapse to firewood because it is easily available to me. That is what he is saying. So this is basically an attitudinal problem. And the third thing he has said, and see, he has used the name of CAG. This is going to densify my answer. CAG has pointed out the possibility of diversion of cylinders for commercial use. This further hurt continuity. So basically, the commercial usage of these cylinders is decreasing the availability of the cylinders which would have gone to rural households. See, these cylinders are supposed to go to the rural households who are identified by SEC data or socio-economic caste census data, but then these are being diverted to commercial use, is what he is trying to say, is what CAG has tried to say, and this person has pointed out. So this diversion is also hurting the continuity. The next thing is the inclusion errors and ghost beneficiaries have hurt continuity of well-deserving households which are identified under SECC. So this should have been underlined. And the next thing is to talk about behavioral problems. Belief that the food cooked on gas leads to indigestion. So this is some kind of superstition which we see in rural areas. Gas cooked food is not good. Food cooked under chulas and stoves like that is going to give you more health, is what they think. But this is just a superstition. This is also a attitudinal problem, so it could have come under 2A. So your answer has to be as streamlined and formatted as possible. That is what we are trying to do. So it could have come under 2A, because they are both coming under attitude or behavioral problems. So far, what has he done? He has introduced me to the scheme, and then he has said the important criteria that are required for the success of any government scheme. Good. Then he moved on to say that PMUY has good coverage. So that is a good thing he is talking about. And then he moved on to tell me that there are issues in continuity, and he has substantiated his points by pointing out CAG report, and then he is talking about behavioral issues and so on. So what do I need to see next? I have to see the way forward. I have to see what solutions this person has in mind in order to solve the situation we have. He says that we have to incorporate SHGs, PRIs and Anganwadi workers to bring attitudinal changes. This is good. So the next thing is that he's talking about oil marketing companies can set up a revolving fund to subsidize refills. So pehle kya tha, we have seen that the refills are not being done because the distribution network is not good, first thing, and the second thing, people don't have enough money, as in the subsidy is not sufficient. So what he's saying is that these oil marketing companies have to set up a fund. This has to make sure that the refills are done, and whatever money is going out of this fund has to be compensated by the government. That is what this he is trying to say. Okay, and the third thing is effective campaigning by local leaders. So overall, he has balanced all the parts of the question, and we'll just see how he goes on to write the conclusion. In addition, LPG distribution network can be made extensive and accessible. This will lead to success of the scheme, ensuring both coverage and continuity. Now I want you all to notice what he has done here. Like in the past 2 videos, I've been telling you all how to tweak the last point you were supposed to write and put them in your conclusion, so that your conclusion becomes more dense, so that your conclusion becomes more enriched. That is what he has done. In fact, in general, if he were a novice, he would have written this as point 4, and then this would have been his conclusion, right? But this person has applied the trick which we have been telling him for the past 2 days. So he has used this point and he has pushed this into the conclusion. Now the conclusion looks good. Basically, is telling that the LPG distribution network has to be extensive, and when it's made extensive, we can ensure both coverage and continuity. And once these 2 things are done, we can be sure that the scheme is going to perform well and achieve its intended objectives. So this is what is the learning of the day. This is one thing we've seen, and overall the answer seems to be good, because there are technical points like revolving fund, and then he has talked about behavioral problems, he has talked about CAG report, and then the best part of this answer is this, because this is what he's trying to ground his answer. This is basically rooting the answer he has given to the question that has been asked. Otherwise, he could have directly removed this and written everything else: coverage of PMUY scheme, the problems, and then the solutions. But then that is not what has been strictly asked. What has been asked is about the functioning of any government scheme in general, and then you have to take the case study of PMUY and apply the template that has been taken above in order to write a good answer. So he has started with this, and he has addressed all the parts, all the subparts in the question very well. Okay, so the discussion for the day is over. So what do? We go back home and then we write the answer and we upload it in the platform. Thank you.